We are talking all about parody and spoofs of music, television, and movies next on Retro Serial. Hey everyone, welcome to Retro Serial. I'm your host, DNC. Glad you could be joining me today. On today's program, we are going to be talking about parodies and spoofs of music, television, movies, and everything we could possibly think out there that has a spoof or a parody to it. But before we get to that program, would you please do me the honor of liking this video, subscribing to this channel, and share it on your favorite social media. If you're listening to this on podcast, please don't forget to write a review and give me a rating and share it on your favorite social media. Those things mean the world to us here at Retro Serial. If you've done all that and you want to do even more, you're welcome to do that by giving to the channel. You can find links in the description box to both our Patreon page and our Venmo support page. So if you want to do that, that's awesome. But the biggest deal is just like, share, subscribe, all that regular good stuff to let the world know about all the great content you're receiving here at Retro Serial. Well, with all that said, we're just going to go ahead and get to today's program. Well, hey everyone, welcome to the program. I already did an introduction, as I always say this every time, but it's always true. I introduce the show at a different time, and then I come on here, and it just always feels like I should say something again. Right now, I have an annoying little robot outside of my door. I don't know if you can hear that or not, but it is a vacuum. Okay, well, if you can't hear it, that's good. It's bugging me big time, but we call it the idiot. It's the vacuum cleaner. It's a little robot vacuum cleaner. But anyway, as I was saying, what we do is I kind of introduced the show, but it always kind of bears repeating because we talk and then I always say, well, this is what the show's about, just so we all know. But it is about spoofs and parodies. And it's one of those shows, again, long time coming. You know, I've kind of wanted to do this a lot. One of the things I wanted to do is like spoofs and parodies, specifically like music. But although I know there's a lot that you could just talk about as far as music is concerned, I don't know enough about parody music to fill an hour of. You know what I mean? And so I thought, well, let's just expand it. Let's talk about spoofs and parodies of all genres, TV, music, movies, the whole gambit. And of course, when we do the whole gambit, then we'll probably leave something out that we should have talked about. But anyway, it's better than talking about Weird Al for 15 minutes than going, what else should we talk about? Anyway, but with that said, I think that it's due proper. And if we're going to talk about Gen X, we're talking about growing up Gen X, and we're talking about spoofs and parodies, that it is like 100% proper to start out with Weird Al. I mean, I think so.
You have to. You really do.
Yeah, of course. So get us started here. Well, did you know about Weird Al from the very beginning? Or
Virtually, and I'll tell you how I knew about Weird Al. And it fits very nicely with the conversation we're having. Weird Al was discovered by Dr. Demento, who of course had his own show for years before. And what happened was Weird Al's first hit, I believe it was in 1977. It was something called My Bologna, which was a spoof, a reimagining of the Knack song My Sharona, and it was just about how he loved bologna. It was his favorite snack, and it was actually recorded.
Thrash, can you turn up your volume just a tad, or get closer a little bit?
I'll get a little closer. So.
Or maybe it's my earphones. Maybe. Go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me any better now?
I can hear you a lot better. It's also my earphones too are kind of down. So
for once, it wasn't mine. Excellent. But yes, so where was it, 1977,
Yeah.
and it was he recorded it in a men's room on campus, where he was going to college, and that was sort of his big breakthrough discovery, and he probably would have never been heard of at all if he wasn't being played on Dr. Demento, who actually had a host of other people who were probably doing very similar things throughout that time, but Al sort of mastered it. Now, the first Weird Al album I have, I believe, was his third, and that one was called In 3D. Uh, but that would have been, I want to say,
Yes.
82, 83. So, and of course, I bought his other albums as we went. So I was there from the get go, certainly before he became the megastar that he is today.
Right, right. I kind of jumped on board as he became the megastar personally. I didn't really know about him until Eat It came out, because that was the MTV generation and I wasn't really connected. But as soon as Eat It came out, I realized, oh, he has other stuff, stuff that's earlier than that. But that album in 3D was great. And the deep cuts on that album are terrific as well. Like a Little Black Spot on the Sun today. There's a sale on our gathering suits today. They're 10% off of yesterday. Remember that one?
King of Suede.
Yes, King of Suede.
King of Suede. Instead of King of Pain, it was King of Suede.
Yeah, that was a funny one. I really enjoyed that. And the truth is Weird Al just keeps cranking him out, and he stays relevant. And one of the reasons he stays relevant is because he keeps parroting songs that are currently popular. He survived the pop age, he survived the grunge age, he survived the neo pop age, and he's still doing it today. I mean, I don't know, I can't remember the last probably the last album that I got, although I've seen a lot of his more recent videos. By recent, I mean the last 5 years. But the last album that I got was Poodle Hair or Poodle Hat. Was it Poodle Hat or Poodle Hair?
Poodle Hat.
Yeah, Poodle Hat.
And that's a guess.
No. No, the one that I have is Running with Scissors. That's the last one that I've got of his is Running with Scissors. But I have Poodle Hat too. And they're still they're great. All of them are they're fantastic. I haven't had a Weird Al album that I've been disappointed in. And of course, when they parodied Nirvana, I was just beside myself with that parody. And the other thing about Weird Al is he doesn't, he had a TV show, he had a cartoon.
Saturday morning cartoon show, yeah.
And he did have a kind of a TV show as well, where he did interviews.
Mock interviews. On MTV?
Yeah.
That was on MTV, wasn't it? Yeah, I remember that.
Where he did mock.
The amazing thing about Weird Al, it's almost like he has his hand on the pulse of both wrists. He picks the songs which are ripe for parodying, but the parodying really hits the zeitgeist. Whatever is a real hot topic culturally.
Yeah.
He takes that. So he merges a top 40 song with a cultural phenomenon. And it's going to seem a little dated now, but I Lost on Jeopardy, which was the Greg Kim band's Our Love's in Jeopardy.
Yeah.
Meets the game show Jeopardy. You put the two together. So fans of the show are going to love it. Fans of that song are going to love it. He always manages to do that. He finds whatever pairs best to stay culturally relevant.
Yeah.
They may not seem culturally relevant 5 years from now or 10 years from now, but at the time, it's like he's just hitting the nail right on the head.
That's a very good way to put it. That's an awesome observation, because it's true. It's not only is the song relevant, but the parody that he's using is relevant too. I remember that with All About the Pentiums. Instead of All About the Benjamins, he did All About the Pentiums. And that was like, when computers were just kind of taking off. And it was actually a little bit after computers were taking off, and people were kind of like, well, how many, are you a Pentium 3? Are you a Pentium 2? Are you Pentium 4? Yeah, a lot of stuff is just it's so relevant with that. One of the things that I also liked about him was the interviews that he did. Did you ever watch any of the interviews?
Yes, they were amazing. And the cool thing about that is sometimes they were authentic interviews. Sometimes what he would do is he would take outtakes the person was making and he would splice in his own
Yeah,
interviewing question. And it was almost, if you remember Space Ghost Coast to Coast, it was virtually the same thing. And the problem is you didn't know which one was which. Is like, is this a legit interview and he's just asking irreverent questions? Or is it simply an amalgam of two different things that he's engineered into this very funny bit?
yeah.
And it
Those are the
always
only
worked.
Yeah, those are the only ones I know about. Is the ones that aren't really. He's not really doing an interview. He's
Some
just.
of them were.
Oh,
Some of
really?
them he
I
would.
didn't know
Some
that.
of Sometimes he would actually do a real interview, and if it works, he left it as is.
Okay.
If it didn't, he would do that splice job. But a couple of them were actually authentic interviews, to my knowledge,
Yeah.
because a couple of them were actually very funny, but also very poignant.
Right.
Like you
Right.
could tell he wasn't just feeding in the silly questions.
Right. Right.
So yeah, that was my understanding.
The one that I really enjoyed was the one he did with Eminem, which wasn't a real interview. Um, I'm pretty sure it wasn't. And by the way, Eminem, because he did a parody of I forgot what Eminem song, but Eminem would
It's on the tip of my tongue, but I can't think of it. Continue.
yeah yeah. But Eminem would not let him do a video apparently for the song, and he did a mock interview, and apparently Eminem over and over says something like, "You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying?" And he just splices them together. And he's like, yes. And at the end, he's like, I know what you're saying. He's like, you know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? And his one with Jessica Simpson's another front funny one that
And
I
he
thought
did one
was
with Arva Levine, and he did a number of them, and they all were genius.
right. And we can't forget when we talk about and when we talk about Weird Al, the artists, there were artists that did not let him do some of his music.
One in particular.
Yes. Fill us in.
The artist. Yeah.
Yeah. Paul McCartney.
Oh, Paul McCartney was one in particular. I was thinking the artist formerly known as Prince,
Oh,
who
yeah.
was later known as Prince. He had asked Prince on multiple occasions over the decades, can I parody your song? And he never would. Prince would never permit it.
Right.
And he kept
right.
thinking, well, look at all the fun the other artists are having. Maybe he'll catch on, or maybe he's lightened up as he's gotten older and isn't such a stick in the mud. Or no. And it went back from. I'm trying to remember the first one. It was off the Purple Rain soundtrack. And Prince was like, no way. And then, but right up until the very end.
Yeah.
And they even passed a law, the parody law, which they should call the Weird Al law, let's face it, where you don't need an artist's permission if you're doing a parody of their work because it's a different intellectual property. Yeah.
Really? You don't have
Yes, no, because it's considered a fair usage and a different rendition. Because it's not the same thing. You're just using the melody. You have to give ownership to the fact that you've borrowed the melody, but you don't necessarily need the artist's permission. He said he would never dream of doing it without their permission, and that's why he never did. I believe that's actually what happened in the case of the Kinks, where initially he would do Yoda in concert, but he could never put it on an album because they wouldn't permit it.
Okay.
But
he eventually did get on an album, though.
Ray Davies, I want to say. Anyway, he changed his mind and said, go ahead, you can use it. And the Paul McCartney story you mentioned, I do want to get to that because that's a good one. I love that one.
Well, before we get to that, let's also mention that Michael Jackson also said no to him because he had done two parodies of Michael Jackson before, and he was going to do a third parody. I can't remember which song it was, but he was going to do a third parody. And Michael Jackson just said, "No, you've already done two. Let's, go on, move on to something else." He was like, "Oh, okay, all right." So, but with that said, let's do the Paul McCartney. Go ahead, get into it.
Well, Paul McCartney, one of Paul McCartney's best known tunes was his anthem for a James Bond film. Guess
Live
which
and Let
one?
Die.
Of course, Live and Let Die. And Weird Al, don't ask me how he got the inspiration for this, but it was absolutely brilliant. He was going to do chicken pot pie. And instead of the da da dun, da da dun, da da, it was going to be a chicken going bok 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 bok. And he went to Paul McCartney, Sir Paul McCartney. He went to Sir Paul McCartney and explained this to him. And Paul's like, "Oh, I'm a vegan, and I'm what do they call that when they're not just vegan person? Like they want to project the vegan lifestyle and hoping others will follow
An
suit."
evangelist, a vegan evangelist.
Let's go with that.
I just call it a vegan because I don't know
Well,
any vegans who aren't vegan evangelists.
he doesn't simply not eat meat. He will not advocate the eating of meat. And he said, if you want to turn it into tofu pot pie, I would be honored if you did one of my songs. And Weird Al said, unfortunately, that would defeat the entire purpose because
Right.
it's chicken pot pie.
Yeah.
And that was, as they say, that. And Paul later said, if you want to do any of my other songs, provided it doesn't reference eating of meat, again, I would be honored.
Doesn't
But
reference the death of any animals or anything like
exactly,
that. So
exactly,
can't be talking about skinning beavers or making leather.
Well, Paul, when he did an episode of The Simpsons,
Yes,
got to be 20 years ago now, give or take. But he actually referred to his vegan lifestyle then.
Yeah.
Because Lisa was a vegetarian.
Mm-hmm.
And the joke, of course, being that vegans would go, well, that's a start, I suppose.
Right. Yeah. And I have not seen the movie yet about Weird Al's life, but I hear that even that's kind of a parody.
It is.
Yeah.
It's a parody of his actual life, which is in fact a parody. I keep meaning to see it. I just haven't had the chance, but I'm astonished that I haven't seen it yet.
I am too. You know what I mean? I'm astonished that I haven't either because I actually really love Weird Al. So it's just weird that I've not seen the movie yet. I haven't carved out time to watch it, but I'm one of those things that I definitely will do. One of the things though that I remember with the Nirvana issue was they were on the phone with him and they were wondering, is he going to make a food reference? Because a lot of his songs do kind of have food reference, not all of them, but a majority of them kind of do have food references. And he was just like, no, we're going to talk about how we can't understand what you're saying. Because I don't know, did you have that problem with Nirvana when it first came out? Like you didn't like, what's he saying? I couldn't understand it. I couldn't understand his words.
Only the part where he starts screaming. And of course, Weird Al goes, and we're screaming and we're playing, but I don't know what I'm saying.
Right.
But to be honest, in the beginning, he's kind of, it's more apathetic than mumbling.
Yeah.
So I could always understand Kurt Cobain. I thought it was clever that he thought people couldn't.
I really couldn't understand Kurt Cobain. Like when I first heard "Smells Like Teen Spirit," I thought he said, "Here we are now, imitate us," and and then I couldn't understand what he was saying. I really couldn't. So I thought he kind of nailed it, for me at least. He nailed it on the head. He's just like, I don't know what you're talking about.
That music video Weird Al did, I think, was possibly his high watermark. Yeah. I really think. I mean, it was just so perfectly put together, and I'm sure he had. We make it sound like he's doing all this himself. I'm sure he has producers and idea men, and I'm sure he gets a lot of help to do these. But the art is his, and one of the things I loved about his parody of "Smells Like Teen Spirit," not only did it so completely capture the spirit, pun intended, of the video. Do you know they actually went out and got the same
Yeah,
janitor
the
and
janitor, a lot of
the
same
slam
actors,
dancers, the golf
same
cheerleaders? You
same
know, it's like
sound stage. Even it was on the same sound stage.
yes, yes,
It, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And I thought that was commendable. I mean, he really committed himself to that work. And yeah, I really think that was possibly his best creation. Not that he hasn't put out great stuff since the last 30 years.
Well, I thought he was pretty. Like again, I thought this is all about the Pentiums was good, and I thought,
Word crimes. Most recently, I think word because and it's funny because opinion is divided. A lot of people think that because we spent so much time uh communicating through text and scroll and all that, that our grammar has fallen through the toilet. I see it the other way because most communication isn't verbal these days; it's electronic.
yeah,
I find the laxing of grammar. It's sort of like slang, but in print form. Do you follow what I'm saying?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Like, instead of saying, I can't think of a slang expression off the top of my head. Like, I'm going to slap the taste out of your mouth. You'd write something like I'm going to slap, and but grammatically it wouldn't be a correct sentence, but you're being very figurative. Like I find when I talk to you, I'll say I'm going to be a few minutes late, and I would say Gonna. Now I
yeah.
know it's going to. I know the proper way to write that, but I write it as I would say colloquially. Now, is that a rationalization or an explanation? I leave it up to you. A lot of people get really upset with poor grammar in text and email. But again, I think it's just an extension of the way we communicate in this 21st century.
It's very interesting, and I'm a little bit of a, and we're going to go off the subject here, but I'm actually a little bit of a language nerd. And I listen to a lot of language courses and stuff like that, and I've studied different languages periodically. And what's interesting is grammar rules are really kind of a frozen in time thing since the printing press, and then also later on as things kind of started to fall off. But it's almost like if somebody like froze in time electronics, like, and this is as far as we're going to go. How often would you use flash tubes? I mean, there's probably flash tubes around still, but you just don't use them. It was really a matter of clarity in speech and writing. That's the important part. And grammar rules became developed as a result of a standardized way of spelling things and text and things like that. So, for instance, it's wrong to do a double negative in English because logically it means if I say, "Hey, don't stop," it means keep going. But normally if I say, "Hey," I say, "Don't stop." There's no issue as far as clarity is concerned, as far as what I mean. And language is that way. And so, for example, I'm sure you know when to use who and whom, right? When to use who and whom, right? Who is a subject, whom is it an object?
Object.
Yeah. Well, we used to have a conjugation for an indirect object for who, and it was wham. We don't use it anymore.
You're kidding.
No. I would not say he threw the ball to whom. I would say he threw the ball to wham. And yeah, because that's an indirect object, right? Like he hit the ball,
yeah.
and the ball is the object, and then it would be wham.
In the ball too, yes.
Yeah. So yeah, so a direct object and an indirect object. Indirect objects. So you go who, whom, wham, and that's just fallen off. We don't use it anymore because it's not a matter of clarity. Even the word who and whom, if you mix that up, it might grind on somebody's nerves. But you're not confused. You're not going away, man. I wonder what that guy was talking about. You know what he's talking about, you know. So I'm gonna go, I'm gonna do this. You know, you're just. I understand what you mean. It's not a matter of clarity, and things just fall off in English. So like,
I can't get over wham.
yeah,
Because I always
wham.
think of wham is in Batman.
Oh yeah.
Wham.
Or
And
the
of course, it would
band.
work. My father picked up the bat hand. Wham!
Yeah,
So I would
right.
be the wham.
Yeah. Anyway, I can go
Embarrassing.
on with language stuff for a long time. This is not a show about language.
It is now.
Well, we used to have, so sometimes people, I'll do this one more, I'll geek out on language, just one more little bit here, and then we'll get back into it. So
Cool.
a lot of times people think of Old English as kind of like fancy English. And
Mhm.
it's not really true. The hithers and withers, they all meant something. So I would not say come here. I would say come hither. I would say the book is here, but I would not say come here. That's wrong. I would say come hither. See, hither means it's action. It's an action. So you're actually doing something. To come hither means you're moving from one direction to another. But that just dropped off. I know you know what I mean when I say come here. You know,
Mhm.
you know what I mean if I say the book. I would say the book is here
Yeah.
because that's a stationary object. But I wouldn't say come here. I would say come hither. But a lot of times people think that Old English is just like fancy. It's just like, oh, he's just being fancy at the end of that. But those endings actually meant something. So when we're talking, when English grammar changes over time because it's a matter of clarity. Nobody is unclear about come here and the book's here. Like, boy, I wonder if he means like if he's talking about a stationary thing or not. You know, it's nobody cares. Anyway, all right, enough of that. Enough of geeking out on language. We were talking about Weird Al. Let's move on a little bit. Let's move on to television shows. I have to. I mean, there are a few television shows that we can talk about as far as spoofs and as far as parodies. But a couple of them come to my mind. Of course, we can always talk about Files of Police Squad, but that'll lead us into what's that
Film.
one? Yeah, film.
So we should. Yeah.
Well, so let's save that one. But there's a few of them out there that are actually very interesting. So, for example, and I would actually want to know your opinion about this. Do you think The Greatest American Hero is a parody or a spoof? I don't know if it's a spoof, but do you think it's a parody or not?
Well, and here's the sticky wicket. It's something that I kept coming across when I was doing my research for this episode. There's a fine line between a parody and an homage. And sometimes the only visible distinction one can make is the intent of the artist producing it.
Hmm.
So what I will say is The Greatest American Hero had moments where it was tongue in cheek.
Right.
So
Right.
one could label it a spoof or a parody if you choose to. But the overall show itself was an homage to vintage superhero shows, particularly Superman.
Right.
If
Right.
that makes any sense. So, what I was thinking, if you want to do TV shows that are parodies, the best thing you could do, well, and I'll leave this up to you, take The Munsters, for example. The
Okay.
Munsters is a parody of the Universal Monsters. Now, one could say, is it not also an homage? Because it took an amalgamation of all these things and presented it in one package. Yes, but the Universal Monsters were deadly serious. The Munsters was a family sitcom and was done humorously. It was never meant to be taken seriously as a monster show. If you did the Munsters and they were actually monsters,
Yeah.
actually being chased by villagers, then it would be a true homage. But because it was done as a comedy, you have to look at it as a parody.
Right. Right. So you think the distinguishing mark, like between a show like The Greatest American Hero and the Munsters is like the comedic element to it.
Not just the comedic, but the slapstick element.
Mm.
Like there was a I wish I could remember what it was. It had the guy from Oswald, the guy who played Oswald in the Drew Carey Show was in it. There was a very short-lived parody series in like 1991, and it was a parody of American private eye shows, action shows, those types of things.
Mm.
The guy who played Oswald, whose name eludes me for the moment, he did one where he was the searcher or the seeker or the something or other,
Right.
and it was this woman would be in distress, and they'd hire him, and he'd somehow save the day, even though he's hopelessly incompetent. And he always talked like this, like he had that intensely resonant voice, and that was a parody because private eye shows and action shows like that were so popular at the time. But this was never meant to be taken seriously. You know who else does some amazing parody work these days?
Who?
Are Heidecker and Tim Heidecker and there's a what Warnheim. That they do a lot of stuff. Or they do the Tim and Eric show on Adult Swim and other things, but they have a show. It was a parody of those old like MacGyver shows that they showed on Adult Swim late night, and it was literally they were only like 15-minute bits, but
Yeah.
they were done in the context of these 80s action shows, and those are definitely parodies because again you couldn't take them seriously if you wanted to.
Right. Right. Yeah. And you mentioned slapstick, and like it's kind of interesting that a lot of shows that are parodies or spoofs, movies included, have this strong element of slapstick humor involved in them. It's just so. I mean, one of the classics that I think of as a parody is Get Smart. I mean, Get Smart is I mean, if we're talking television shows, it is a classic parody show of Mission Impossible. Or I don't even know if Mission Impossible came out first or if Get Smart came out first, but it's a parody of that kind of thing, of a Bond kind of, James Bond, Mission Impossible, that kind of thing. But there's humor there, but there's a lot of like slapstick kind of humor, a lot of, mops falling on you when you open the door and slipping and falling and
Or a guy with a board who keeps turning to one side.
yes.
Whap.
Right.
Because
right.
you never want people to mistake these for being the genuine article. Someone actually told me that Our Man Flint with James Colburn was, a lot of people see it and they don't realize that it's a parody. They think it's just another secret agent franchise. And they go, no, we went to great lengths to make it zany, but it's lost on a lot of people who see it. So sometimes you actually have to go the extra mile to get people to realize that you're not being serious.
Yeah,
if that makes any sense.
No, yeah, I do think that's true. I'm going to look up here. Our man Flint.
Our Man Flint.
Okay.
Our Man Flint. They made 2 or 3 of them, I want to say,
Okay.
and they were. I guess you'd call them homages to private eye movies, secret agent movies.
Okay.
But a lot of people just didn't realize that they weren't meant to be taken seriously and thought they were these legit.
So that show's not meant to be taken seriously. Oh, very interesting. I'd never heard of it, but now that I look at it, I could see that maybe people wouldn't understand. Especially people today, looking back on it, might think that it's a serious show. I think another show one of the shows that I think was a little bit of a parody was Sledgehammer. Was it Hammer? Was it Hammer or was it Sledgehammer? The cop movie in the 80s?
Yes. I think it was just I can't remember now. I think it was just Hammer, but I could go either way.
Yeah, that was a funny show. Like where he pulls out the gun and it's like a really long gun, and That show was a little bit ahead of its time. Unfortunately, I think that was one of the reasons it didn't go over so well. I mean, it had a very loyal cult following, and it was on for I don't know how many seasons, but I mean, not as long as it should have been on. But I thought it was great. I mean, I thought that show was really good. The other show that I think of is well, I mean, there's obviously different genres too. I mean, so you could even go like with news parody shows, like uh, you know, that news parody show that was started by Craig Kilborn, and then it went to that other comedian. I forgot his name.
Daily Show.
The Daily Show. Do you think that's a slapstick or not a slapstick, but a parody?
Um, Here's the situation with that. Now, again, I've watched the show for many years.
Did you watch it back when it was with Craig Kilborn?
Yes, that's when I started through Jon Stewart. I don't get to watch it as much anymore because I'm just not up that late. But here's the weird thing about that show: like the human interest stories they do are all meant to be tongue in cheek, but they're all legit. Like for example, they actually did one about here on Cape Cod. A few years ago, they were putting together a wind farm out in Nantucket Sound. It was going to, on paper, solve the Cape's power problem. But a lot of people didn't want it because they were afraid it would destroy the aesthetics of the Cape Cod coastline and destroy property values of the people who owned land on the waterfront. So it became this huge class issue where the rich were like, nah, no way, you're not ruining my view. And the working class are like, we need cheap power. And it also kind of went back and forth between the left and the right because the left has always been like, ooh, renewable energy, man. And then we go to build a wind farm and they're like, not this time. So
Yeah,
it became this real mess here on Cape Cod, and people argued and bickered, and nobody got what they wanted. But the Daily Show actually did one of their remote spots on it, and they actually really, if you could probably still find it here on YouTube. They actually really delved into it. So even though it was done tongue in cheek and there was a lot of laughs, and the guy doing it, Samantha Bee's husband, he was certainly making fun of people on both sides. The issue he had and the facts he brought into play were all spot on. He did
yeah,
his journalistic homework. So again, is it a parody? Well, yes, but if he's actually presenting the news, that's the news. It's just the news in a humorous way. There was a news station down in Florida years ago, and they did the news almost as like a kids variety show,
right.
but they did the actual news.
Oh, okay.
And so if you put it on, you'd think you were watching like Uncle Silly's Happy Hour, but it was the Channel 12 morning news. And when you actually watch it, like, oh my God, he's actually doing the news. It's just very funny the way he's presenting it.
Right.
And so is that if they're actually giving you what they say they're giving you, I don't know if that's a parody.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. I guess maybe one of them would be not necessarily the news. I think that would definitely be a parody.
That's a parody because those weren't actually news stories. Those were conjectured humorous
Right.
things.
Yeah. And probably the other one, well, I mean, in some sense, most sketch comedy is parody. You're parodying a movie or you're parodying some type of situation that we all find ourselves in. But the news on Saturday Night Live is certainly a parody news as well. Another one that I think of when I think of this is Strangers with Candy. Do you think Strangers?
Yeah.
That's definitely like it's a parody of like teen drama, maybe. Or
Um, I used to love that show too. Um, it reminded you know what it was a parody of? Those after school specials.
yeah,
Remember those ABC after school specials where it was all really contrived melodrama and
Yeah.
always aimed at teen issues, and they always hit you over the head with the message, and at the end there was always a happy ending.
Yes.
That's what Stranger with Candy was. It
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
just a nonstop
Teen
after school
mellow
special.
teen melodrama.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think
And
yeah.
those are based on a real person. I wish I could remember her name. She was a woman. She was from New York. She got involved in drugs, and after she cleaned up her act, she would do this sort of say no to drugs circuit. She would give lectures at schools, and she would, in this very riveting, this very like no nonsense, like I destroyed my life and I don't want you to destroy yours. Format. She would like actually speak plainly to the kids, trying to keep them from doing drugs. I guess it didn't
Right.
help much, but that Jerry Blank is actually based on this real woman who tried to make a difference.
That's hilarious. That's really
Sadly it is.
I know people who I knew a guy who like, oh my gosh, it was a parody, but you didn't know it was a parody. Like he didn't know that he like it was so bad.
That happens. That happens. Yeah.
He was like a musician, and remember that chopping broccoli, like it was like that, but he was serious. Like he was serious about it. It was so bad that when he played his stuff for me, I had a hard time not just busting out. And he had like a studio and everything. Like I don't know where this guy got his money, but he had a CD out called Different, and he's and I don't know if he's still here on YouTube, but there's a song on YouTube, and I don't know if he'll ever hear this or not. I feel bad because he was kind of like a friend of mine to a degree. But there's a song here. Well, you know what? I'm not gonna bring it up. I'll if I find the song, I'll put it in the link below. But
Nice. So we don't have to mock him publicly.
It's
Well,
a serious song, and all of his songs were serious, but it was so bad. I mean, it was comically bad, but he's sitting there with the straightest look on his face. He's not kidding. And you're like, dude, this is terrible. I mean, this is comically terrible. And everybody I played the CD for, they just bust up laughing. And I'm like, this is not a joke. But you can tell it's not a joke. I mean, that's what makes it funny, is you can tell he's not joking.
I remember years ago, and I'm not making fun of anyone who likes country music. I need to open with that. But I will never forget years ago, when the cable companies were trying to create bigger packages, there was a situation where they had changed our cable service, and we had a country music channel. I don't know which one there, because there have been several over the years. I'm going back almost 30 years, but we had a country music channel on our cable options. And one day I was channel surfing,
Yeah.
and I came onto what I thought was an SNL sketch, because
Oh no.
it was two people dressed in country music garb. But if you were going to do a parody, like a meme, like if you were making fun, if you were mocking people who were into country music, say 40, 50 years ago,
Yeah.
like Lash LaRue and Roy Rogers, and like very silly country garb, and they were talking in that, we're going to bring you some of the most countryest country music coming down the pike, and in that really heavy drawl. And I go, I'm it's funny because comedy's cool, but you really shouldn't make fun of people like this. But it's fun. I'm watching it thinking that it was this sketch where they were making fun of a country music channel, and I watched it for about 45 minutes, and it just went. And I'm like, oh, this is actually a country music channel. So it is possible to confuse parody and non-parody depending who's presenting it. And it's entirely possible that people on this show, they were playing it up either for their audience or for other audiences, because people do that. But again, I watched the show for like 45 minutes thinking that it was a joke. So
thinking that it
I
was a
definitely know
joke and it
wherever you
actually
speak,
wasn't a joke.
and it wasn't a
You
joke.
know, I've had that happen to me before where what happened was is I thought it was serious at first, and then they kept going on and I kept going, this can't be serious. This can't be serious. And I'll tell you what show it was. But it was a radio show. But eventually I'm like, okay, this has got to be a joke. Then I found out it was a joke, but they were presenting it as serious. And it was the Phil Hendricks show. Have you ever seen?
No.
Oh, well, he does all the voices himself. And he used to come on the radio. And there was a time that I was kind of listening to the radio at night. And, it was like on like once a week before Coast to Coast or something like that. But it was Phil Hendricks. And he's a funny guy, but he does these interviews, and like it starts out like a serious issue, and he just keeps going on until you're like, oh, this is a joke, man. I didn't really realize this. And one of them was about what's it called, like your rules of your neighborhood, like the rules,
like an HOA type
yeah,
situation.
like it was an HOA, and he was talking to this HOA person, and she starts talking about like how they had to call out on this girl because she's inviting her boyfriend over and stuff, and then it just starts getting more and more ridiculous about how young he is, and she claims she has a broken hip, and she doesn't have no broken hip when he's coming over. But it's presented seriously.
Like deadpan, I think, is the word you're groping for.
Yeah,
where they're being very, very serious about it.
He's being deadpan. He's like, well, you can't possibly be upset about this. It's like, well, she claims she can't take her trash out back to the curb on the same day it gets taken out because she has a broken hip. But yet she's got this young boyfriend that comes over, and she ain't got no broken hip. You should see this stud. It's like she ain't got no broken hip when that young boyfriend comes over. But it's dead.
Who used to do stuff like that? Martin Mull. Martin Mull used to do bits like that, where it would be like rules to live by or something like that, and he would start out with like things like, I don't know, if you lay your clothes up for the week and then you're not in a hurry every work day, and if this happens, do this, and then it would get into more and more insane situations. And like I remember the last one, and if your children's dolls get up and start doing a hideous demonic dance of death, and they become possessed and like go like this, it's like, pull the torches out of your torch cabinet and set them on fire. And he's doing this as if this is like an actual thing, but if it's gone completely off the rails by this point. And again, that's another tactic. Sometimes the parodies work best if you can sell the person that you're serious, and then just when they believe you, say, oh no, we've been kidding this whole time. And that's like the reveal at the end.
Yeah, right. Okay. Well, I think Files of Police Squad, and we got to talk about movies for sure.
Oh, we have to talk about movies. Do you want to open with the movies?
Well, I mean, to me, the pinnacle of parody movies is, at least my favorites are the Naked Gun series. I wasn't disappointed with them. Well, Airplane, Naked Gun, all those ones are they're so funny to me. What's interesting about Naked Gun is it started out as an evolution of a television show, which was also called Files of the Police Squad.
Which was adapted from, of course, Airplane, because Leslie Nielsen played the Doctor in Airplane, and they loved his character so much they go, we have to reuse him.
Yeah.
And at the time, pop shows were very popular, Hill Street Blues, and others were going back 40 years ago. But the funniest part about Airplane, and there were parody movies before, and as we've discussed, and parody movies after, but the amazing thing about Airplane, and I'm sure you know this, I don't know if our fans do, it's almost scene for scene based on this old 50s, very serious melodramatic movie called, I believe it was called 0 Hour.
Yeah. I know which one you're talking about.
And what they did was it was like an MST3K situation. They were watching it one rainy afternoon and making fun of it, and they go, "This would work so amazing as a comedy. The only problem is we'd have to play it totally, totally straight." And that's why they scoured Hollywood, getting their hands on every one of the actual serious action drama stars they could get their hands on. People forget Lloyd Bridges, Leslie Nielsen, Peter Graves. They all were known for these like hard hitting movies. I mean, granted, Peter Graves um, did a lot of those schlock sci-fi horror movies, and Lloyd Bridges did Sea Hunt, but they were action stars and serious action
Yeah.
stars. And I remember one of them wanted to do it as a had also done comedy and said he wanted to play it comedically. And they're like, no, 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 absolutely not. You play this as though it's one of those Irwin Allen disaster movies. You play it over the top, straight laced drama, hemming it up as much as you can. And it worked. It worked so well.
Yeah.
And that's why I think that's probably the best parody of all time.
Airplane's terrific. It's one of my favorite. I did like Airplane 2 as well. I didn't care for it as much as Airplane 1, but I thought what's that?
It was good.
Yeah, it was good. It really was.
It was good.
Especially with William Shatner in it. I thought that was great. But there's nothing that beats Airplane. I mean, Airplane is terrific. But then of course we got to get to the Naked Guns as well. They never did Airplane 3. But they did Naked Gun 1 and 2.5 and 33 and a third, and I loved all of them. I thought they were all really great. You know, and the dirty joke where he's like, "Hey, nice beaver." She's climbing up. She says, "Oh, I just got it stuffed." She hands down a beaver. But it was, you know, those detective shows. And the one where he's talking to himself and he's walking along and you know, and all of a sudden he's like, "And then where the hell was I anyway?" You know. Finally, he looks back, and as he's walking, he does the hopscotch on the ground, and he's, you know, just going up, and then finally he's out in the sitting there walking and talking to himself, and he's out in the middle of nowhere. And with the Queen, was that, I can't remember if that was the first one or the second one, but with the Queen.
Second, I want to say.
Yeah, I do too. But I'm not 100%. And the third one is when he goes inside. Now, the difference I think between Airplane and those is those do come off a little bit more funny. I should say less serious. Where you're right, you know, Airplane is really deadpan. You know, they're really serious. Where this is, it's still very serious, and that's kind of what makes it.
They don't break the fourth wall,
yeah.
But you can tell they're kind of like laughing to each other while they're delivering their lines.
Yeah,
it was definitely a comedy.
Yeah, did you like the Naked Gun series?
I love the Naked Gun series.
Well, what else?
I thought it was.
Yeah, what else could we talk about as far as the movies are concerned?
One that I did not love so much, and God knows I tried, and unfortunately, the parody film sort of fell into a trap that so many other American subgenres do, where if the people don't fully understand it, it's not going to work. Like, for example, the pirate movie. They decided that rather than make an actual true adaptation of the Broadway play, they were going to make it as a parody. And they added all kinds of just like silly things. Like there's one scene where the Pirate King is yelling and he goes cartoon red, because that would be funny, wouldn't it? There's one scene where she's yelling at a group of cops who won't listen to her. And she goes, "I'll call your inspector on you." And Inspector Clouseau comes out in this very forced fake French accent, and they have a little exchange. And I'm like, oh, I get it. It's a Pink Panther reference, because that's the thing parodies always have. They always have a reference to something irrelevant. And there were a few other things like that. And I'm like, a parody isn't simply doing something silly and making a lot of cultural references.
Yeah.
A parody is you have to have your pulse on the actual thing that you're making. The most ambitious attempt I think I ever saw, and I'm not quite sure that it worked, but you have to give them full props, Woody Allen, he did What's Up, Tiger Lily? And his way of doing a parody of it was he took an actual Japanese action movie and just redubbed it with a lot of silly, humorous lines, but are being delivered in this very serious action movie kind of way. But it's just sort of off the rails, irreverent humor that he was known for. And I think it would have worked great as like a TV special, but bringing it out to 105 minutes, um, the gimmick started to wear thin at the end.
Right, right.
Also, not all the jokes worked because the whole thing was very, very, very padded. But you had to give it to him. I mean, very few people do a parody where they actually use the direct source material
Hmm.
for the parody. You had to give it to him.
Well, there's one too that also that was called Kung Pao Enter the Fist. Did you see that one? Where the guy
Yes.
basically it was a martial arts movie that never got finished, and he basically finished it, but he superimposed himself into the film. And I used to love that show. I thought it was great. I thought it was really good. I don't know if like a show like did you ever see Best in Show?
Definitely.
Yeah, is that like? Do you think that's a parody or no?
Yes. All those movies, Best in Show, Mighty Wind, This is Spinal Tap, of course.
Oh
They're all
gosh,
parodies on a
yeah,
specific subgenre to the point where, and I remember, I got this quote from someone, and I don't want to give it to the wrong person, but I'm just gonna like swing wildly. Um, Rob Reiner, let's say, I believe he's the one who said it. Rob Reiner said when he was working on that film, because a lot of the stage personnel they got actually were roadies from actual um, uh, concert tours.
yeah, right.
And of course, he's doing this mockumentary. And after like a 12, 14-hour day shooting and everyone's just really exhausted, one of the ones who was getting a little short with him says, I don't know why you're calling this a comedy. It's not even funny. This is exactly what it's like when you're on the road with this talent. And Rob Reiner said it was the best compliment anyone had ever given him
Right, right,
because
yes.
he was going for an absolute deadpan exact replica of the experience, and he captured it, and he was like, it wasn't for nothing.
And this is Spinal Tap is one of the best parodies of all time. I mean, that's one of the funniest shows. What's interesting about a show, a movie like Best in Show, is it's not a parody of another movie though. It's like a parody of
A subgenre.
yeah of a community. It's like a parody of or a subculture.
Well, because we've seen documentaries of the bands we've loved for years from
No, I was talking about
was it
Best in Show.
I'm sorry, I was stuck with Spinal Tap. Best in Show, yes, it is. Yes, the whole dog show circuit,
Yeah, the
definitely.
dog show sub community or community subculture. It's not a parody of like a band or something more. It's a parody of a subculture, which is very interesting. It makes it a very interesting parody. Um, I think parodies really kind of lost me. I started getting out of them when Scary Movie started coming out. I thought Scary Movie was pretty good, but then they did one on the Spartans. I think it was called the Spartan. Did you see that one? I didn't care for it. It was it crosses the line for me to be too slapstick and too many stupid jokes
I think that
between
was
people.
Epic Movie. Was
Yeah.
that Epic Movie? I think that was Epic Movie.
No, there was one just that was on Spartans.
Just on the 300.
Yeah, just on the 300. I think it was called the Spartans.
Okay.
Epic Movie wasn't terrible. I didn't care for that. I mean, I don't know. Did you not like that one?
There was a 20-minute segment making fun of a MTV reality show about celebrity homes that I didn't even watch.
Oh
And I
yeah.
remember thinking, can we please just advance the plot?
Yeah. No kidding.
I get it. You're starting out. You're a Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe
Right.
parody.
Yeah.
Great, and you want to chalk or block it with a bunch of pop culture relevance. Super, I'm on board. But again, if you lose your audience trying to be wacky,
Yeah.
you've lost your audience. I
It's
mean,
pretty bad. Yeah.
and
Uh,
like I say, the pieces are all
Disaster
there.
movie. Yeah. Oh,
The,
sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, no, just the pieces are all there, but you have to really, and I hate to beat a dead horse, but you have to like have your hand on the pulse of the actual entertainment. If you go too far in any one direction, you might know all the ingredients to a lasagna, but that doesn't mean you're going to make the world's best lasagna. You might make just a bowl of gunk. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? You really have to master the art.
Yeah, yeah, that is a good way to put it. And it gets too distracting. It's like there's a point where the jokes get too distracting. You
Mm-hmm.
know, it's just they're not there's too much of them to not move the plot forward to actually make it a movie. I felt that kind of crack a little bit with like I said with Scary Movie. And then they did Epic Movie, and then they did Disaster Movie, and those things were just they weren't the best. There were segments of them that were pretty good, but they certainly weren't the best.
Exactly. Yeah,
Um,
I love the scene in Epic Movie where they're fighting and the one girl is not quite on board with everyone else. They go, "Oh wait, look, a clue," or something like that, and she smashes somebody with a lamp, and they're all kind of looking at her. She goes, "Oh, I'm sorry. Was the fight over?" And for some reason, that struck me wicked funny. I'm like, because I could see that because they,
yes,
they always they always all know when to stop fighting at the exact same time for the purposes of drama.
right,
But in a
right.
real fight, you'd be too caught up in the fight to notice somebody noticing somebody.
Do you think Anchorman is a parody, or no, just a comedy?
It's a comedy, but one could certainly make the case because it parodies a number of the genres. It's part rom com, it's part success story.
Yeah,
One of those rags to riches and back to riches to rags and back to riches stories. It's certainly a hero story. It gives the backdrop of the American journalism movement. People love. We were just talking about Network the other day on one of my shows. People love movies about the whole journalism, uh, community in
yeah,
this
yeah.
country. So you could make an excellent case that the story of Ron Burgundy is in fact a parody.
Yeah, it is. I think you can. I don't think it's listed as a parody, but I think it certainly could be a parody. I don't think
You
when
could make
people
American case.
think of parodies, they don't think of Anchorman, but I do very much think that it could definitely be a parody. Um, we're gonna have to wrap it up here. I'm sorry, I have to get going. I think there are a lot of
Awesome.
parodies out there. We could talk about Austin
Well, we will.
Powers.
When we do this on Monday, I'm sure people
When
will
we
throw them out
Yeah, when we
left
do it
and right.
on Monday, that's why you
We'll
got
have
to be
minutes of
now. If you're
material.
a podcast listener, please share this on your favorite social media. Consider donating on Patreon or Venmo, and subscribe to the YouTube page if you want to see more. And I'll link my YouTube page and Thrash Pondo Ponds' YouTube page in the comments or in the description box. And let's see. Thrash, you have your show on YouTube every Thursday night. Is it every
Thursday.
every
I've been
Thursday?
every Thursday. I've been doing some Tuesdays. I don't know I didn't have one this week. I don't know if I got one going on next week, but I'm definitely Thursday.
Okay.
So you will see me tomorrow at 8 Thrash time. That's Eastern Standard Time to you guys.
All right. And yeah, and definitely we're gonna, if you like this podcast and you want to chime in and be part of the audience, we're gonna talk about the same subject on Monday night, but you'll get a chance to chime in. And the other thing is if you're a YouTube watcher or listener, please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe to both of our channels, share on your favorite social media, get the word out about both of our channels. It would mean the world to us. And I've been Ian C, and this is my friend Thrash Pondo Ponds. Till we meet again, stay safe and stay retro, all of you.
Peace.
Peace. And I don't even know where the record button is to stop this thing.
Oh no, Jane, stop this crazy thing.